You've walked with us through the snow of Germania. You've seen the last breath of a boy emperor, and you know now how the Roman Empire lost its peace. But history doesn't pause when blood hits the ground. From the corpse of Severus Alexander rose a man the Senate feared to name, a man the soldiers worshipped as a god of war, and the people cursed as a barbarian tyrant. This is the story of Maximinus Thrax, Rome's giant emperor. In spring to 35 AD, the Rhine frontier, the snow had barely melted when the legions, drunk with the power of choosing their own ruler, turned to a man who towered over them, literally. Maximinus was said to be a monster in size. Ancient writers claimed he was more than 8 feet tall, with hands that could crush a man's skull. His strength was the stuff of campfire tales. He could supposedly pull a cart on his own or outpace cavalry in full armor. Born in Thrace to a peasant family, he was not Roman by birth, nor noble by blood. He had been a shepherd, a farmhand, before picking up a spear, and once he entered the army, there was no stopping him. Maximinus climbed the military ranks through sheer brutality and skill. He never lost a fight in the training grounds. He was the first into battle, the last to leave, and unlike the silk-robed politicians in Rome, he lived and bled with his men. So when Severus Alexander's soldiers turned on their emperor for being too soft, too diplomatic, Maximinus was the obvious choice. The army hailed him as Caesar right there on the frontier, without the Senate's approval. For the first time in Roman history, the throne belonged to a man entirely made by the sword. But what the soldiers saw as strength, the Senate saw as a nightmare. Maximinus hated the Roman elite. He despised their politics, their wealth, their privilege. To him, they were parasites, feeding on the labor of soldiers like him. And soon, the streets of Rome would run red as he made that hatred a reality. The age of emperors born in marble palaces was over. Rome had a barbarian on the throne, and the empire was about to feel his wrath. Maximinus Thrax now held the empire in his massive hands. But those hands were made for gripping swords, not signing laws. And soon, Rome would learn what it meant to be ruled by a soldier who saw politics as just another battlefield. The Senate, those robed patricians in their marble halls, had not chosen him. They had no say in his rise, and Maximinus made sure they remembered that. He purged the Senate of anyone suspected of loyalty to Severus Alexander. Trials were a formality. Sentences were death. Those who had once dined on silver now choked on their last breaths in prison cells. Properties were seized, fortunes confiscated, all to feed the one machine Maximinus valued, the army. To keep the legions loyal, Maximinus poured gold into their pay. But Rome's treasury was not. Endless taxes soared across the provinces, heavy levies on farmers, merchants, even temples. And when gold still fell short, he sent agents to plunder the estates of the wealthy, Every whisper of dissent reached his ears, like a dagger at his back. He trusted no one outside the ranks, not the Senate, not the governors, not even his own advisors. Maximinus moved the imperial court far from Rome, living with the army on campaign. To him, the city was nothing but a nest of conspirators waiting to stab him in the dark. In the field, he was relentless against the Germanic tribes. He fought with the ferocity of a man proving his worth every day. Ancient writers claimed he waded into battle bareheaded so his men could see him, towering above them like a war god. But while he bled the frontiers, the empire's heart rotted. In distant provinces, unrest grew. Governors plotted. Cities whispered of rebellion, and the Senate waited. The cracks began in Africa. A revolt flared, led by provincial governors who refused to bow to a barbarian emperor. They proclaimed their own rulers, Gordian I and Gordian II, backed by the Senate. Maximinus crushed the revolt with the same merciless hand he used on the battlefield. But the message was clear. His enemies were everywhere, and even Rome's heart had turned against him. Still, Maximinus believed he could outfight treachery, just as he had every enemy before. He did not yet know that his final siege would be against Romans, not barbarians, and that the very army that had raised him up would soon leave him to die. By 38 AD, the empire had become a chessboard of rebellion. The Senate, desperate to rid itself of the barbarian emperor, threw its weight behind new rulers. The Gordians had failed, but their spirit of defiance had spread. When the Senate declared Maximinus an enemy of Rome, he did the only thing a soldier knew how to do: march on the city itself. But before he could reach Rome, he faced an obstacle: the fortified city of Aquileia, loyal to the Senate. Its gates were sealed, its walls bristling with defenders. Maximinus expected the siege to be swift. It was not. The people of Aquileia fought like cornered lions. Every attempt to breach the walls was met with arrows, stones, and boiling oil. The emperor's temper, once his greatest weapon, turned against him. He ordered mass executions of townsfolk captured outside the walls, hoping to break their will. Instead, it only hardened their defiance. Weeks turned into months. The spring rains came, turning the camp into a swamp of mud and disease. Food ran low. Horses died. Soldiers grew restless. They began to whisper, not about the enemy beyond the walls, but about their emperor. Why were they starving here? Why were they fighting Romans instead of protecting the borders? The gold promised to them was gone, swallowed by the endless siege. Then came the moment Maximinus had never imagined. One night, a group of his own officers entered his tent, not with reports of victory, but with drawn blades. There was no trial, no speech, no chance to rally the men. The giant who had once terrified Rome was cut down in his sleep. along with his son. The soldiers mounted their heads on pikes and carried them to the gates of Aquileia as an offering of peace. The siege ended that day, not with a victory for Maximinus, but with his memory smeared in blood and betrayal. His reign had lasted barely 3 years, yet it left scars across the empire. Rome would see more emperors rise and fall in the years to come, many just as brutal, most just as doomed. The crisis of the 3rd century was far from over. You've just witnessed the fall of Rome's first barbarian emperor, a man too strong to fear the Senate, but too blind to see the dagger in his own camp. If you want to see what chaos came next, subscribe to Lost Chapters.